quest@grnonline.com. If you have any questions about the show, or you have any suggestions, or you really want to hear us interview somebody, shoot us a message. That's thequest@grnonline.com. In today's show, I'm going to do a little throwback Thursday, if you will. My background is the I love, and how I got started in media and how I got started as a speaker is all based around Pope John Paul II's theology of the body. And so I've talked about it a few times since I started doing the Quest almost a couple years ago now. And I got to throw it in there every now and then. I don't want it to be the only thing I talk about, but it almost is the only thing I talk about outside of the Quest. And so I think, obviously we have new listeners and our beloved frequent listeners, but I think it's just something that's so crucial for our time that it's always worth going back to and referencing. So we are going to do, so Dr. Edward Sri, big fan, Dr. Sri, if you're listening, big fan. He wrote a great article called The 5 Key Features of the Theology of the Body. And he references George Weigel a lot, who is Pope John Paul II's biographer. And so it's a really, really beautiful article. But even so, Dr. Edward Sri is the man when it comes to breaking down Pope John Paul II's highly philosophical writings. We were just talking, a couple of us, we had a priest friend over, and my husband and I were talking to him, and someone was describing Pope John Paul II's writing like an onion. All right, so you like peel back that initial sort of, the skin, and you're like, I got this. Yeah, look at this thing. It's round. It's like an apple, right? It's kind of like an apple. You take a bite. Oh, no. There's about 400 layers here. It all goes in a circle, and I don't understand it, and it's nothing like an apple, nothing at all. I can't understand this, is how I have felt for many years reading anything that Pope St. John Paul II has written, because he is a brilliant, beautiful, amazing, and holy saint, and also just a philosopher and an artist, and writes as one. He writes very artistically, very philosophically, and so if you've ever tried to, you're like, hey, I feel like picking up a papal encyclical, Pope John Paul II. I mean, he's real sweet. I remember seeing him, in the 80s or the 90s. He came to San Antonio, and he waved, and he's just so kind, and you always, I want to read something you wrote. I don't recommend just going straight in like that. I mean, you can. The first several times I tried to do it, I was like, am I dumb? Do I have a brain between my ears? What's in there? I can't understand this at all. But I'm very, very grateful. I did a little, it was like an R&R / mission trip to Mexico. It is a boarding school for children who come from, challenging family backgrounds. And there was one afternoon we didn't really have anything on the schedule, and I was sitting in this beautiful little casita with all the windows open, as they do in Mexico, in this like perfect, 70-degree weather. And this beautiful rainstorm came in, and it was just pouring rain for like 30 minutes. And then it cleared up, and there was a rainbow in the sky. And it's exactly as magical as it sounds. And I had brought a copy of a book by Dr. Edward Sri called Men, Women, and the Mystery of Love. Not men-women, men, women. and the mystery of love, and so he breaks down a book by Pope John Paul II that he wrote before he was elected Pope called Love and Responsibility, which is the most difficult piece of anything I've ever read in my entire life. So I'm very grateful for Dr. Edward Sri, because that book, Love and Responsibility by Carol Wojtyła, I know, don't come at me for my pronunciation. I'm Mexican American Irish, so just don't hate. So the Love and Responsibility is broken down in Dr. Edward Sri's Men, Women, and the Mystery of Love. And Love and Responsibility is the basis for the 129 catechetical addresses that Pope John Paul II that comprise the theology of the body. So when I say the theology of the body, or when you hear someone say theology of the body, what do you think of? What do you think of, Matt, when you hear someone say theology of the body? What comes to mind for you?
Theology. I mean, obviously, I think of Pope John Paul II immediately. Mm-hmm. And, now that it's 2024, I just think how prolific, how prophetic all of his writing is, because in a world now where we're so confused about the basic biology and creation of man and woman, here is this Pope who wrote about this topic in a way that's so clear and precise and explains all the things that people are having problems with. And it was eye-opening at the time when it was written, but now to many it's still eye-opening now.
Yeah.
One of the I remember is I've had actually several non-Catholics who have found Theology of the Body and really loved it. One of the quotes I think from Theology of the Body is, "Happiness is rooted in love." And it's so simple, and it's so clear, and it's so beautiful. But I have a very positive view of it, and it's I think it's what's necessary for Catholic schools to be teaching, especially for middle schoolers. It approaches these topics in just the right way.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same?
Absolutely.
And Sarah, happy Feast of the Queenship of Mary today.
Yes.
Which it is.
The queen.
And
our queen.
Our queen, Pope John Paul II, was so devoted to Mary. And, Mary's role as a mother is really tied into the theology of the body. I don't know if you feel the same way too, but I think that there's a real connection there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to say. So I used to, I lived in Belize for a while, and I was traveling around giving talks on the theology of the body. And the simplest way that I was trying to break it down to, obviously you can get really, you can make it very age appropriate when you need to, as far as obviously you're not going to be teaching a room full of, elementary age kids about the conjugal life and things like that. But theology of the body you can start to teach it from a very, very young age. I would say, like my son, who's almost 2, that I often try to live out what Pope John Paul II teaches in the theology of the body by loving my husband and loving him well. And so it can be incorporated from a super young age without actually talking about the actual theology and hey son, come here, let's pop open sacred scripture and really dive in here about creation and the fall of man. Okay, do you know what can you say concupiscence, son? But I think it's applicable to all ages. But I absolutely think it's become necessary that we teach it to our middle school and high school age kids. I think obviously parents are the primary educators. The catechism says, right, of their children, but not every parent is going to feel super confident in disseminating this information. So it's important that we educate ourselves as parents, but that if we're sending our kids to Catholic school, that we ask about what kind of curriculum they're teaching when it comes to the theology of the body, because it's extremely beneficial for young people. You have something to say? You're looking at
Sarah.
We've been working together long enough.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Well, I feel like I failed when you asked me what do I think of when I think of theology of the body, because I went really, basic and straightforward. But actually, the book of Genesis is really I think it's a key to be. Sometimes the book of Genesis is hard to understand in a sense, and I think that the theology of the body is actually a really good tool for getting to understand, so just wanted to throw that 2 cents in there because
absolutely no. Today's show is going to be back to basics. So we're not going to try to unpack every single one of the 129 talks. He goes deeply into celibacy. About the married vocation, and he goes into so many things, and we simply just don't have time. Even if I did the next 129 shows all on each one of the talks, it still wouldn't be sufficient, because there's just not enough time to unpack everything that there is. And so I really encourage you, those of you who are listening, if you've ever wanted to know more about the theology of the body and really, really start to understand what Pope John Paul II was teaching, and to really start to, like Matt said, to unpack the book of Genesis, which can be quite confusing for most of us. Not you smart listeners, just people like me. If you ever really want to start to unpack it, I highly recommend you start with Dr. Edward Sri's book, Men, Women, and the Mystery of Love, and we'll have that linked in the show notes. Really fantastic. It's actually quite easy to read. I read it in an afternoon, and I'm no smarty pants, but it was that good, and it was that easy to consume and to understand and to sort of break down. And so highly, highly, highly recommend Dr. Edward Sri's Men, Women, and the Mystery of Love. So, that being said, today, when we get back after this break, we are going to unpack the 5 key points, the 5 key takeaways from Pope John Paul II's Theology of the Body. Those are 129 catechetical addresses that he gave between 1979 and 1984. Absolutely beautiful about love, human sexuality, what it means to have a human body, and how we can try to mirror the Trinity by loving each other. And it's this really, really beautiful way. So we'll be right back after a short break. I'm your Monday, Thursday host, Sarah Soto. We'll see you in just a sec.
This is a Messy Family Minute with Mike and Alicia Hernan. Teaching kids to handle money can be tricky for parents. In our own experience of raising 10 children, we've used envelopes, allowances, and more. Well, here's a tip from what we've discovered. There is a sensitive period for money when kids are about 10 to 12 years old. Be alert when your child expresses interest, and then take advantage of that teachable moment.
Don't pay kids to do household chores because they need to understand the importance of contributing to the home. However, we have found it is a good idea to pay for extra chores. Give your child a chance to earn money, whether by raking leaves, moving stones, or deep cleaning a room. In addition, a great job could earn a bonus. This trains them in excellence and gets them ready for work outside the home.
Giving your children experiencing earning money is important because this is your time to train them to save, to budget, and to tithe, which is giving money away because it ultimately comes from God. To listen to our podcast on kids and money, visit us at messyfamilyminute.org.
Welcome back to The Quest, an extraordinary journey where every step brings us closer to discovering God's love for us. Want to join the conversation? Give us a call at 877-757-9424.
Hey y'all, welcome back. Today we're talking about the 5 key takeaways from Pope John Paul II's Theology of the Body. According to Dr. Edward Sri, we're not going to pretend to give you all of the meat and all of the potatoes of this incredible series of 129 talks that the great John Paul the Great gave there in Rome. We can't do that. There's just not enough time. So we'll go over the 5 key points. But before we jump into that, I do want to share that the theology of the body is integral to my journey back home to the Catholic faith. I was already back in communion with the church, attending Mass on Sundays and actually most days at the point that I discovered Pope John Paul II's Theology of the Body. But I had actually gotten hired. I know this, every time I tell someone this, they look at me like I have 3 heads. But I was working as an abstinence educator in public schools. So I live in the great state of Texas, and the city that I live in, there's not a lot of school districts here, I'll tell you that. And the school district that I was working with only allows for abstinence education.
That's so based.
Well, you say that, except insidious groups of the devil, like Planned Parenthood, circumvent that by teaching abstinence until you feel like it. Yeah. Which is like abstinence till prom night or whatever. But it's so much better than many other cities here in Texas, which teach things to 11-year-olds that I'm not allowed to say on the radio. And so I'm very grateful to be in the city that I am. I'm very grateful that the large school district here has abstinence education as the standard of what they allow, contractors to come in and teach. So I was teaching Abstinence Until Marriage, is really beautiful program. I mean, it had flaws, but it was a really, really good program. And I started to recognize, it was 2 weeks. So I was with these kids for 2 weeks, middle school and high school, not together, but as I almost right away, the first few schools that I taught, I'm seeing tears in their eyes. I'm seeing like not a single cell phone out. No one's passing notes. No one's talking while I'm talking. And I'm thinking, oh, they're like starved for truth. They're starved for dignity. They're dying to hear that they're worth waiting for, that they don't have to be sexually active as young people, that they, that marriage is good, and that despite what they've seen perhaps witnessed in their own families, that marriage is what's best for children. And as I'm describing the benefits of a child living with their own two married parents, being less inclined to live in poverty, less inclined to be emotionally, mentally, and sexually and physically abused, all these things, I can see that the kids are like, I'm abused in that way. My parents are divorced. They're like making all these connections. It's all a science base. It's not some I don't know. I mean, I wasn't like wearing like a crusade, costume, like a crusader in there. Like I was subjecting myself to Rome in a very respectful and appropriate public worker kind of way. That's another story for another time. But I could just see that the kids were so excited to learn about the goodness of waiting until marriage and the goodness of being valued, right, for more than just what they can offer someone for a short period of time, or this really non-committal kind of relationship. And as I'm watching these incredible changes in these kids, from day one until the end of the program, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, the church has always said this. What's up with that? Where did they say it? When did they say it? How did they say it? I was very newly back in the faith, and I hadn't been in the faith since I was like a preteen. And when I was a preteen in the faith, I wasn't really I wasn't reading like any papal encyclical documents or like breaking open the catechism, on the weekends. And so I didn't know. I didn't have any knowledge at all. And so it just dawns on me when I see the benefits of this Abstinence Until Marriage program. I'm thinking, yeah. The church has always said, wait, what do they say? So I did a little researching on the old internet, and one of the first things that popped up is Pope John Paul II's Theology of the Body. Now, I already had kind of a friendship with him. It escalated into like a full-blown, I don't want to say obsession, but there are some key figures in our life. There's like 20 pictures of him up in our house. Okay, I'll just say it. I'm comfortable here. But I love my dear, gigantic shouldered friend in heaven, Pope John Paul II, and constantly ask for his intercession, particularly for the intercession of young people for their return to modesty and chastity, and constantly asking for his help and for his fatherly guidance. He's such an inspiration to me. And when I discovered the Theology of the Body, my life changed, and it has not been the same since. I think it was over 10 years ago now at this point. And so I'm sharing it with you not because I wanted something to like fill the airwaves with, but this is like the nearest and dearest thing to my heart. And I hope and I pray that these 5 key elements of the Theology of the Body by Pope John Paul II, kind of broken down so we can like digest them by Dr. Edward Sri, help you to understand that we are so much more than our sexuality. We're so much, anyone struggling, right? Like whether you're struggling to remain chaste, whether you're struggling with same-sex attraction, whatever the struggle is, whatever it's a heavy cross for a lot of people. And so the Theology of the Body is immensely healing in that it dives very deeply, very philosophically into sacred scripture to essentially, the easiest way I could ever describe it, and you may disagree with me, but when I was teaching very young people in Belize who had never heard of anything like this before in their lives, I was telling them that the Theology of the Body is how we know who God is through the way our bodies are made. through the very way that our bodies were fashioned and formed, we can begin to know who God is just because of the physical way that our bodies are. And so, that being said, the first key element of the theology of the body is what Dr. Edward Street calls the law of the gift. The law of the gift. So, as you and I know, we don't have to dive into it too much here. A huge majority of people out in the world are seeking relationships, and they are seeking to be served. In fact, I would say in the vast majority of the experience that I've had working with young people, the general attitude is, I want to be loved. I want to be cherished. I want to be treated like this. I want to be treated like that. And I have yet to hear maybe but a handful of young people who are saying, I want to find love so that I can serve my spouse, so that I can serve any children that the Lord blesses us with. And so this law of the gift is written on every human heart. And essentially, it's based on our being made in the image and likeness of God. So as a young person, as a teenager, and probably even younger than that, when I heard, you are made in the image and likeness of God, so this sort of like cartoon image of God pops into my head, or maybe like what's the Sistine Chapel, right? So it's this like big, bearded, burly, muscular, kind of like Renaissance-y looking. I'm made in His image. Like I'm like have like long, flowy, beautiful white hair, and I have like a toga kind of a situation on. That's how I'm made in God's image. I had no idea what that scripture meant. I'm made in the image and likeness of God. And so it's really important as Catholics, as Christians, that we truly understand what it means to be made in the image of the Most Holy Trinity, of the Triune God. And so one of the best ways I've ever heard it described is that, so God the Father, He gives Himself, right, completely, totally, faithfully to God the Son, who is Jesus Christ, and Jesus accepts that love, fully receives that love, and completely gives Himself back to the Father, totally, faithfully, and completely. And that love that exists between Father and Son is so real and so good and so holy that it actually is a third person, not a created person, not as a result of the Father and the Son having already existed, but it just is a third person, and that third person is the Holy Spirit. And so I think it's important for us to understand that if the Most Holy Trinity is a Trinitarian embrace, three persons, right? In this, they exist in perfection. The Trinity, like God doesn't need us. Like we don't, our existence and our singing a pretty worship or like a pretty Matt Maher song in the car. Like I love Matt Maher, so it's no dig to Matt Maher, but like our singing a song, singing Matt Maher very beautifully, or wearing a suit and tie to mass. Like not that you shouldn't wear a suit and tie to mass. I'm just saying, like no matter what we do and no matter how well we do it, we don't add anything to God's greatness. God's not made better when we do things appropriately, when we avoid sin or when we commit sin. Like God is not made better. He is complete. He is total. And he has no need of us. He created us out of love in His image. And so what it means to be created in the image of the Trinity as man and woman, and I want to emphasize that, it says in sacred scripture, male and female, He created them. It's very, very crystal clear about that. Why we're questioning it in this day and age, I have absolutely no idea, but that's a whole another show, which I'll actually have here in late September, so tune in for that. But being created in the image of the Trinity, it means that we're not meant to be alone. It means that we're not meant to be self-serving, self-seeking, and trying to take advantage of each other, trying to find the things that give us pleasure and seek that out, like no matter what the consequences are, no matter who gets hurt, no matter what lies we have to tell. It means that rather than all those awful and worldly things, that we are meant to be in personal communion, and not just personal communion with one another, but we are meant to be in that personal communion of self-giving love, the gift of the self. I'm going to get this wrong, but somebody analyzed Pope John Paul II's papacy to find the phrase that he said more than any other phrase. in his talks and his writings, and it ended up being, I can't remember the number of times, but it was man does not fully, I'm paraphrasing, man does not fully know himself until he makes a sincere gift of himself. And so all of us that are trying to search and find purpose and meaning, and we lay awake at night and we're like, why am I here? What does this all mean? Why did this thing happen? Or why didn't I get this job? Or, why is God allowing this? And when we're up at night and thinking all those thoughts and they're racing through our minds, we need to know, really know that we're never going to figure out who we are. We're never going to know what it means to be made in the image of the Trinity until we make a complete and sincere, total gift of ourselves to another. Okay, obviously in marriage, spouses do that. For the celibate, they give themselves to the church, and so on and so forth, to the service of others. But you will continue your search, you will continue your agony until you make the decision to grow in virtue, to practice the virtues, and give yourself in sincere and total love to another. Because when you do that, when you are in communion with another person, one of self-giving love, as Pope John Paul II constantly reminded us, that is when you begin to mirror the very inner life of the Trinity. I'm going to repeat that just in case you got distracted for a second, because it's really important. If you are made in the image and likeness of God, and the purpose for your creation is to be in communion with the most holy Trinity, then when you are in a intimate, personal communion of self-giving love, meaning you are not self-seeking or selfish, you begin to mirror the inner life of the most holy Trinity. That is the purpose for which you were created. We're talking about the 5 key takeaways from Pope John Paul II's Theology of the Body, according to Dr. Edward Sri. You don't want to miss this show, folks. It's going to be a really good one. We'll unpack the rest after a short break.
This is Life News Radio. I'm Jim Anderson. A Planned Parenthood affiliate with its mobile abortion unit connected to the DNC convention is being accused of violating its tax-exempt status. 40 Days for Life CEO Sean Carney says targeting political parties and candidates with free abortions and other in-kind gifts is strictly prohibited by the IRS, a basic rule that every nonprofit understands. His formal complaint seeks IRS assessment of whether the Planned Parenthood stunt violates its 501c3 status. Florida's High Court Wednesday says it will allow new financial disclosures on November's unlimited abortion ballot. Costs to taxpayers listed include funding abortion, defending state abortion restrictions in court, and ultimately the decline in population from abortion would harm the state budget. This is Life News Radio.
The view, the accurate view of the human person, changes everything. The news you hear and see pertaining to the human person has the power to inform or misinform your opinions and what you do with the gift of life and what you allow your government to do. It's why we at this station offer news on the life issue. We hope you carefully assess what you hear, read, and view.
A survivor of a communist death camp escaped with her family to America, where they believed their rights would be protected by the state. 89-year-old Ava Adel protested abortion, was convicted under FACE Act and terrorism laws, and now faces over 10 years in prison. In April, she told the Daily Signal, "When I was indicted, I began to prepare to die in prison." During her trial, she said, "We need suffering in our lives in order to be purified and not feel sorry about ourselves." And remember to support this station. Without this station, there may be no voice in your community on the life issue. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at lifenews.com. This has been Life News Radio.
You're listening to The Quest, a pilgrimage of faith. Have a question or something to share? Call the show live at 877-757-9424.
Hey y'all, welcome back. I'm your host on Mondays and Thursdays, Sarah Soto, on The Quest. You can shoot us an email if you have any questions, suggestions, comments, or you want to link to anything that we've shared or talked about. What did she say? I didn't quite get that. I want to know more. Shoot us an email at thequest@grnonline.com. Today we are talking about Pope John Paul II's Theology of the Body, the 5 key takeaways, written by Dr. Edward Sri. As per usual, there's so much to say and never enough time. No, I'm not trying to, I'm not asking for like a 4-hour radio show. That would be silly, but there's so much I want to share with you guys. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Pope John Paul II talks about and reflects on a concept called original solitude. This is our second key takeaway from the Theology of the Body. Original solitude is a reflection on Genesis 2, verse 18. So Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. It is not good for man to be alone. So Dr. Edward Sri is like, does this seem weird to you? There's like animals and like waterfalls and like all these plants and stuff. He's not alone. He's not like in a void. So what does it mean that it's not good for man to be alone? He isn't alone. There's probably chickens. I don't know. I'm not an animal guy. I'm not an animal gal. But I don't know what's there, but he's not completely by himself. Like, would you consider yourself to be alone if your dog was hanging out with you? I don't know, but it does seem a bit odd, I think, at first. It is not good for man to be alone. There's all the vegetation and stuff keeping him company, but he's described as being alone. And what that should indicate to us is that what it means to say it is not good that man should be alone, for man to be alone, is that there is no creature or vegetation or anything else hanging out in the Garden of Eden that is like Adam. He is unique. He's unique amongst all of creation. There's nobody else like him. In fact, he has what Dr. Edward Sri calls, he's got a spiritual dimension. He is both body and soul. So no matter how high and low he searched, he's not going to find a creature quite like him. Not at all, in fact. And so it poses a bit of a problem. So the law of the gift, which we talked about before the break, meaning we are made to enter into personal communion with another, and to make a sincere and total gift of ourselves so that we can mirror the inner life of the Trinity. If that is written unto every human heart, Adam can't live that out. If there's no other for him to enter into personal communion with, if there's no other for him to go into, to give, to love in a self-giving way, but that's what he's made for, it proposes a bit of a problem. That's why God says it is not good for man to be alone. So, in all his wisdom and fatherliness and brilliance, Pope John Paul II says that man only finds fulfillment when he is able to enter into that relationship of mutual self-giving. Not just living for himself, but for another. So it's like difficult, right? You can't really realize that. You can't really know your purpose. And if your purpose exists, but you don't know that purpose, it can be a bit confusing, which I imagine it was for Adam when he was, in fact, alone. Because it's only upon his existing with another that he can actualizes. He exists for someone now. Before, he experienced what Pope John Paul II calls original solitude. You may have felt like you were in solitude before in your life. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever felt like there was nobody else around and you were all alone? Maybe you went out in nature and you were like at the Grand Canyon. There was nobody else around. You were like at a very isolated area, and you're like, this is solitude. Sure, but Adam is unique in that he's the only human that has ever existed that experienced this original solitude, to need, right, to have it written on his heart that he is the law of the gift, that he is made to have self-giving love for another, to make a gift of himself, but not have any others. They don't exist. And so Adam is super unique in this way. He experiences, again, that original solitude. So it's only upon existing with someone that he can realize, again, that he can live out the law, essentially, live out the law of the gift. That brings us to the third key element of theology of the body, which is original unity. So first, we're talking about the law of the gift, right? Giving of the self-giving love, living for another, not selfishly, not trying to seek pleasure seeking and trying to get your thrills, as you know, the kids say that, right? People understand what that means. Get your kicks on roots. Anyway, so you're not living for yourself, and you're not selfishly seeking to receive pleasure out of a relationship, but have it one-ended. The law of the gift means that all of us, despite how we live, despite how much sin we enter into, all of us live with the law of the gift written on our hearts, and that's why it's so painful. That's why there is no happiness and there is no fulfillment in these relationships that are selfish, in these relationships that are based entirely on physical connection, that aren't honoring the Lord's commandments. Because if you're living for yourself and want to be with someone just so as long as you feel served, and that the minute that you don't feel served, or the minute you're just not happy anymore, you just don't have fun anymore, you decide to bolt out the door, whether you have children or not, whether you're married or not. The thing is that this road of selfish living always leads to destruction. Loving yourself and living for yourself is not what's written on your heart. And so when you live against it, you will find, whether it hits you early on or later on, you will find misery, because it goes against your very nature. Your very nature is to live for another. It's to live in self-giving love. I know, it's like to put others before you, right? It's crazy. What a crazy concept. The world tells me that I have my own version of the truth, and I am supposed to, tell people, you do you. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. So in this, and then living out that law of the gift, not being able to live out the law of the gift is what Adam experiences in his original solitude. There's no creature like him in the Garden of Eden before Eve is created, and so he is in solitude the way no other human has ever been, right? Well, it's only when he exists with someone that he's able to live out the law of the gift. And that leads us to the third point, which is original unity. Okay, so the Lord creates another person. That's why he says it's not good that man should be alone. So the Lord creates Eve to be Adam's wife. And it's so funny. This is kind of like my tagline. Maybe I should tell my husband this is what I want on my tombstone. How big of a tombstone do you think I need, folks, to write all of this on there? But this is my favorite thing to share with people, or my favorite thought to share with people, is when I was first getting into the theology of the body, and we're looking at now. So Pope John Paul II's reflection on original unity comes from Genesis chapter 2, verse 23. Then the man said, "This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." He exclaims this, right? Then the man said, "This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." Now, I don't know about you. I mean, I don't think that Adam had access to Google. If he could have listened to like a Catholic radio station, obviously he would have been listening to Guadalupe Radio Network. I don't think that he had access to it, though. That being said, because he didn't Google this information, because he didn't, you guys remember what an encyclopedia was? It's like made out of tree. It's heavy. He didn't look at an encyclopedia. He didn't have a friend tell him. He didn't go to a cool class at like the Newman Center where they were talking about theology of the body and stuff. When Adam saw Eve, when he first saw her, he just knew. He knew inherently that they were made for one another. So he says, "This at last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh." I want to add here, as Dr. Sri highlights, Pope John Paul II noted that this is the first time we hear man exult. This is the first time man rejoices. I know that my husband is probably listening to this, so I just want to reiterate. Upon seeing his wife, this is the first time man exults in joy, okay? He's filled with joy. And it's because he sees that he can live out the law of the gift. In this, he says, at last, these birds are great, but now I know I can live out this law of the gift. Look how beautiful this, I don't know, I'm gonna mess this up. Someone's gonna write us in and say, there are no tigers in the Garden of Eden, but I'm gonna say tigers anyway. This tiger's great. But have you seen Eve? Has anyone seen Eve? Because it is just, 10 out of 10. At last, this is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. He's filled with joy, and he knows. Nobody had to tell him. He didn't go to a class to know that he can now live out the law of the gift and be who he is called and meant and made to be. In communion, in personal communion with another. Personal communion of self-giving love. Adam and Eve become one flesh in Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. This oneness of flesh, Pope John Paul II says, is not just a bodily union, but it points to a deeper spiritual union. Dr. Sri says, a union of persons. I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to anyway. There is no sexuality in heaven, and therefore, obviously, it's ridiculous that anyone, and people have implied, what does it mean, what, husband and wife are mirroring the image of the Trinity if there's no sexuality in the Trinity? Well, because the conjugal act, just like Pope John Paul II says, is pointing to a deeper reality, a union of persons, which is even more meaningful and impactful. The Most Holy Trinity is a communion of three persons in an eternal embrace of self-giving love. So when husband and wife come together in the conjugal act, this spiritual reality of their oneness is, or they're essentially renewing their vows. Right? They're essentially giving themselves to one another. The most intimate way that humans can give themselves to one another. We must recall, and we need to teach our children, and we must live out choices that reflect the reality that we are not just a body. We are body and soul. And that body-soul union, Pope John Paul II says, sheds a very bright light on human sexuality. Have you ever heard the term body language? Oh, the way that lady, the Walmart tire center talked to me, I didn't like that kind of body language. She was all huffy and puffy, if you know what I mean. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not what Pope John Paul II is talking about. He says that the body has a language. And that language communicates something much more profound than an idea or information. It reveals that the body has a living soul. It makes visible what is invisible. It makes the body and the spirit and the union between husband and wife make visible what's invisible. Oh my gosh, there's so much more to say. We're going to take a short break. Today we're talking about the theology of the body and the 5 key takeaways according to Dr. Edward Sri, one of my very favorite authors. Hey, maybe I should ask him to be on the show, huh? It's just so incredible. It's so incredible. We're only through 3 points. We've got 2 more after a very short break. So far we've talked about the law of the gift, original solitude, and original unity that Adam and Eve experienced. Tune in for more. Don't change that channel. We will talk about the last 2 key points of the theology of the body right after this break.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for August 22nd. Today we celebrate the queenship of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Though Pope Pius XII established this feast in 1954, Mary's queenship has roots in Scripture. At the Annunciation, Gabriel announced that Mary's son would receive the throne of David and rule forever. At the Visitation, Elizabeth called Mary the mother of my Lord. In the 4th century, St. Ephrem referred to Mary as Lady and Queen. Hymns such as Hail, Holy Queen, and Hail, Queen of Heaven also address Mary with this title. Much Christian art depicts Mary in royal robes. The feast of Mary's queenship is a logical follow-up to the Solemnity of the Assumption. After Mary was assumed into heaven, we believe she was crowned Queen of heaven and earth. Mary's queenship is a share in Jesus' kingship. Mary was predestined to be the mother of Jesus. As Jesus was to be king of all creation, Mary was to be queen. As Jesus exercised his kingship on earth by serving his Father and his fellow human beings, so Mary exercised her queenship. As the glorified Jesus remains with us as our king till the end of time, so does Mary remain as our mother and queen. There's more about the saints along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
This is The Quest from the studios of the Guadalupe Radio Network. Share the show with a friend. You can find us on social media. Want to listen again? We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts.
Hey y'all, welcome back to The Quest. I'm your Monday, Thursday host, Sarah Soto. You can listen to me and our other fantastic hosts, Monsignor Charles Pope and Steve Gleason, every Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern, here on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Download the Guadalupe Radio Network app or stream from our website at grnonline.com. You can also check us out on the YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter X. I'm saying that right? Twitter X. That's
Rumble, TikTok.
Oh.
I don't go to TikTok, but we're streaming there.
You didn't have to say that you don't go to TikTok. I could have guessed by saying
yeah.
no. I could have guessed. There's a few things that led me to believe that, but saying I don't go to it is kind of the key.
I don't talk. You guys sound hipper.
Yes, keep saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell
Homie,
other people that.
Yeah. I don't talk, yo.
Homie,
Okay,
don't
I'm
talk.
interrupting you. I know you have.
No. You
We got 10 minutes and you got a lot more to go. So sorry about that.
No worries at all. So I do want to say that I'm not going to be able to unpack the entire theology of the body with you here today. I'm going to try to do something very bold, though, and I'm going to try to interrupt myself before I get to the last 2 points and tell a very, very short story. I could have told it by now, without the intro. So I can't remember the name of the priest. If you know the name of the priest, call us at 877-757-9424 and tell me, because I've been trying to think of it for years. 877-757-9424. But there was a priest who was in seminary in Rome when Pope John Paul II was not only Pope, but during the catechetical addresses that later comprised the Theology of the Body talks. So it's just, you're just chilling in seminary, and then you're like, I got to get to the papal audience. And you're like, I'm late. And you go, and over the loudspeaker in Italian, you hear the man himself saying, not only, I'm not going to try to do it. Should I do it? I'm going to try to do it. I'm not doing Italian. I'm doing like my Pope JPII. It's out of love. He's like, not only does a man look at a woman with lust, commit adultery in his heart, but even a husband who looks at his wife with lust commits adultery in his heart. Can you imagine hearing the Holy Father say that? Now we get to the nitty gritty of it, and we think, well, I'm really good. I'm really holy. I'm not looking at any other women. I'm married. I see somebody wearing something immodest. I look away. Okay. I don't talk, because on the talk they got dancing ladies. But to look at one's own wife with lust, the Pope said in the Theology of the Body series, that even he commits lust or commits adultery in his heart. And that brings me back to a point I've been making a lot lately in some of the talks I've been giving that I shared with you all on Monday's show. I'm sharing all of this with you about the theology of the body, not so that you can further elongate a list of rules that you feel like you're already following as a Catholic, but rather I'm sharing the theology of the body with you for what I think is the same reason Pope John Paul II shared it with the world. And that is, I want you to ask yourself, with all that you do, especially in your relationships with others, what is the intention of your heart? What is your intention behind initiating intimacy with your spouse? What is the intention of calling this meeting with your boss? What is the intention of this friendship? What is the intention of this evening that I'm going to spend with this person I'm dating, et cetera, et cetera? What is the intent? What is the disposition of your heart? Oftentimes it will tell you all the answers that you need when you take the time to reflect in prayer. Where is my heart at? What is my motivation in this? That being said, I have 2 points and just a couple minutes left in the segment today. Why am I like this? Got in trouble all the time for talking in school, and guess what? Joke's on you, Mrs. Drew. Now I have a radio show a couple times a week that I love doing. So, without further ado, the last 2 key elements of Pope John Paul II's theology of the body. After there is a law of the gift that we must live out, which means we are meant to give ourselves in a self-giving love completely and totally to others, to another. The second point is original solitude, which Adam experienced alone. No one else experienced that with him. And original unity, the reality of intimacy, deepening it deepens a man and a woman's communion because it expresses their entire commitment to one another. It's a total gift of the self, right? The lifelong commitment, the gift of the very body, totally and completely. It's very unpopular these days, although it feels like it's making a comeback, which is nice. But our bodies have a nuptial meaning, as the Pope says over and over and over again. Also, petition to bring back calling a wedding a nuptial mass. I'm just, shoot me an email if you want to get that petition going at thequest@grnonline.com. Nuptial mass. No, don't call it a wedding. It is a wedding, but that's another point. The fourth point I want to stress with you all today about the theology of the body is original nakedness. In Genesis 2:25, Adam and Eve were naked and not ashamed. So Dr. Shree says that shame involves the fear of another person when we're not sure that we can trust that person. I'm going to reiterate that one more time. Shame involves fear of another person when we're not sure we can trust that person. Okay? So the fact that Adam and Eve were naked and not ashamed, meaning they had no fear that they couldn't trust the other. They weren't ashamed at all. They had total trust, security, and love, and the law of living out the gift. They had it down pat. Okay? Essentially, and this is my absolute favorite part of the theology of the body, the entire thing, let's say what I feel like I can get a grip on, is that Adam and Eve, before sin entered the world, were able to look at one another with the Creator's eyes, essentially, with the Creator's gaze. The vision of the Creator is exactly what Pope John Paul II says, the vision of the Creator. So I want you to take a second and imagine how God looks at you. Oh, Sarah, I can't understand. How does God see me? I've done so many things wrong. I've messed up and I've fallen away. I'm struggling right now. I'm committing big sins now. No. Not your perception of how God sees you. How does God actually see you? Well, in Isaiah it says, he holds you in his arms and caresses you like a mother caresses her child. So whatever you're saying, how God sees you like this or God sees you like that, let's take our brokenness out of it and let's really understand that God sees us as a loving Father. He sees us as worth dying for. And so before the fall of man, Adam and Eve had this unique and supernatural perspective. They are able to see each other with the vision of the Creator. That means there is no lust in their hearts. That means they are perfectly capable of giving themselves to one another and receiving the other. And God actually says, it is so good. It is so good. This is so good. They are so good. And seeing each other with this, Pope John Paul II calls it an interior gaze. They experience what you and I will never experience, which is, well, short of heaven, right? Which is the fullness of the intimacy of persons. Intimacy at the fullest, most perfect way. Pope John Paul II says they are immune from shame. And the result of it is love. Maybe it's a sign from heaven. We're not supposed to talk about shame today. Let's think about the vision, the vision of the Creator. Originally, we could look at each other with perfect eyes. So let's try. Let's try as much as we can to look at one another, husband or wife, married, friend, coworker, boss, person that annoys you, whatever it is. Let's try to look at each other with the vision of the Creator. Let's try to love one another as God has loved us to the point of laying down his life. I'm your Monday, Thursday host here on The Quest. We are journeying on this pilgrimage of faith with one another. Shoot us a message at thequest@grnonline.com. Otherwise, we'll see you very soon. Thanks for listening, and God bless you.
Faith, hope, charity. This is the Guadalupe Radio Network.